I'm Betty Swann. Welcome to our show, Wisdom in the Night, where you get help for the tough decisions in your life. Tonight I have a great guest. He's the senior pastor of Every Nation New York City Church and is an international minister. Welcome, Ron Lewis.
All right, Betty, great to be with you.
Yeah, you're a guy that I can tell from your bio, you have done a lot with your life. And I want to know all about you. I want to know just your background. Tell me where you came from, all about that.
Yeah, well, introducing me as a pastor would have been probably the greatest shock of my life many years ago. I grew up in an extremely secular family that was, we had, in essence, we were part of a synagogue, and we would go occasionally, as Jewish people in the South would, we would occasionally go to the synagogue, and I was learning a little bit of Hebrew, a little bit of the Bible. Then my parents split ways, and we just, in essence, as a family, became agnostic. When I was 15 years of age, a lady up the street actually gave me a Bible, and I never touched it, never read it. I thought, that's a holy book. I wouldn't know what to do with it. And remarkably, though, when I went off to college as an 18-year-old, I stuck that Bible in the back of my car thinking I might need it as a literature book, and it might save me 20 bucks, you know, which the Bible...
That's great. That's
right.
Really actually being an entrepreneur, kind of.
Well, I was maybe being thrifty. And when I got in my dorm room, for some reason, I'm unpacking everything, and I began to open it up, and a nice note fell out from 3 years prior when this great, sweet woman up the street gave me this Bible. Yeah. She wrote me a very pleasant note. I read it, and then I found a $5 bill in there also. She gave me $5 for a cup of coffee. And I looked around a little bit more. I hoped I might find a 20 or a 50 in there. And I didn't, but I began to read the Bible, and it was most amazing.
What made you start reading the Bible?
I don't know. I think I consider myself open-minded.
Even though you're an agnostic?
Yeah.
You were interested in reading the Bible?
Well, I consider myself open-minded. I'd read a lot of poetry and philosophy and things from a lot of religions, but I never knew the Bible. And I had a taste of that as a child. In the synagogue. We would read the Torah, or the 5 books of Moses, 5 books of the law. And I was being drawn. And as I began to read the Bible, in particular the New Testament, it was in that period of time, I was a freshman, really going to ramp up my partying and hedonistic lifestyle. And I had an encounter with Jesus Christ in the Gospel of Mark. And I became a believer.
What does that mean?
Well, first off, the Gospel of Mark's one of the 4 Gospels: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John.
In the New Testament.
Yeah, in the New Testament. And as I was reading just the life of Jesus, there was something that began to just yearn in my heart to know Him personally. And I just really had a belief that Jesus was connected with God the Father as His Son, and He was sent into humanity to live a life I couldn't live. And then He died a death I should have died, but He did it in my place. And then 3 days later, He was raised from the dead and witnessed by more than 500 people.
Okay, now wait a minute. So you're an agnostic, didn't believe any of that, didn't see any need for the Bible, and something changed. Yeah. And you suddenly wanted to know all of it.
Yeah.
Was somebody praying for you, do you think?
Probably a lot of people were praying for me. Now, I wasn't an antagonistic atheist. I didn't have a chip on my shoulder against Christians. I just never really met Christians, and I'd never been to church, so I'd never seen anything that was real to me. But when I was reading about Jesus, how He would care for the poor, how He would touch children, empower women, how Jesus would turn over the money, He wouldn't tolerate religious hypocrisy. He was loved by the sinners, yet hated by the religious. I thought, here's someone that I can relate to. And not only that, but He was God, and He is God. So Jesus, He just came and He was incarnated in a little baby's flesh, and yet He had all the vulnerabilities of a baby, yet He had the authority of the Son of God, where He could command the elements, He could make the wind stop, He could stop the storms, He could open blind eyes, He would stop funerals, He would go on a boat ride one way with His disciples, and He would walk on the water back another way.
Amazing.
He did all these things.
Amazing.
And all of those things pointed to who He was, that He was the Messiah, that the Jewish people were longing for and expecting. So what I found in Jesus is not a religion. I found a relationship with God, changed my heart, changed my life, changed my destiny.
Well, now I want to ask you something. Do very many Jewish people believe in Jesus today? Do you find that they are?
Yeah, I mean, I think really considering the fact that Christians have done many things that would dishonor Jewish people and their precious faith, there would be no Christianity without Judaism. And so there's a bad disconnect there. There's one that we need to work on healing, and that's something that I do here in New York City as the director of the Christians who are United for Israel. We esteem the Jewish people. Without the Jews, there would be no Bible, there would be no prophets, there would be no covenants, there would be no hope, there would be no Peter, Mary, Paul.
There'd be nobody.
Right. So the Jews have given us salvation through Jesus, and Jesus himself was Jewish.
Well, could I ask you a question I've always wanted to know? How could God of the universe, who could have picked anywhere in the world to start all of this, picks this little do-nothing country that is so tiny it's a blip on a map of the Middle East, and yet most of the world was going on in the Greek and Roman world?
Yeah.
How could God do that and make it all happen so big all of time is measured by his birth and death?
Yeah, and that's a great question, and I don't know that I can give an authoritative answer, but I will say a couple of things. Is one, God chooses the nothings and the nobodies of the world to confound those that are somebody and something. So God chose the meek, the mild, one of the lowest geographic areas, and it was a total fulfillment of several prophecies that were spoken multiplied hundreds of years prior to when Jesus came, that every Jewish person would have known that the Messiah would be born in Bethlehem, and the Messiah would be the offspring of David, which Jesus was. The Messiah would be royalty, and the genealogies of Jesus, which the genealogies to us may not mean that much, might give us a sense of esteem if we find out that there's somebody important in our background, in our lineage. But for that generation, the genealogy determined your inheritance, determined your birthrights, and so many other things. And it was in that genealogy that Jesus was placed in a family line through the father, through the mother, that both aligned with David, the beloved king. And all the prophecies pointed to this Messiah would be the offspring of David, and much more would be born in Bethlehem, and so many other prophecies that would point to Jesus. But more than the prophecies was the lifestyle. He never sinned, was the death of Christ, that he took our place on the cross, and his resurrection, that God would not let his son undergo decay, and God raised him on the third day. And it was through that resurrection that even the doubters became, like Thomas, became believers, and people like me have been so impacted. So to date, more than 2 million Jewish descendants have become followers of Jesus, and that they don't find that to be a conflict or betraying their heritage. Matter of fact, someone like me, I now appreciate my heritage much more than before I knew Jesus. So
now, do they still call themselves Jewish?
Many do. Many still call themselves Jewish, Messianic Jewish, completed Jews. There's a lot of labels for that, or names for that. But for people like me who are so secular, I just identify with being a follower of Jesus Christ.
That's what you say. You don't say I'm a Christian. You say I'm a follower of Jesus Christ.
That works for me.
Well, great.
Yeah, it does.
I don't think there's a rule.
I had a lot of problems with Christians who said they were Christians, but in reality, they weren't.
Right.
And they were the ones, I think, a lot of times that caused the most harm for people who are seriously seeking God. They became stumbling blocks.
All right, I want to ask you about that. There, there are people watching this show that they're saying, they're shaking their head. Yep, that's why I don't want anything to do with it. Yep,
sure. That's
what I don't like. So what would you say? This is a show about wisdom. What would you say to a person who's struggling with that?
Yeah.
Saying, I like Jesus, but I don't like some of the people I've seen that say they're one of his followers.
Yeah.
And they're people who love truth.
Sure.
What would you say?
Well, I think, number one, I want to validate that they've had a bad experience, and no one would deny that. But the other thing I'd say is that we all are sinners. And sinner just means missing the mark. that we have acted irrationally, we have violated God's commandments, we've done the wrong thing, and we all need a Savior because of our sin. And so all of us are just like the hypocrites that we hate. We're all hypocrites.
We've probably all been a hypocrite, haven't we?
Well, exactly. And it was people who called themselves Christians who would look at me and call me names like Jew boy, kike, various names and things like that. And as a younger child, I didn't really even understand what's the big deal. We're all in this world together. No one's better than the next person. And the more I began to grow up, and then when I actually met God and God had mercy on me, I began to see that, you know what, everyone wants to take out their frustration on someone because of their own dissatisfaction with themselves. And if we all just look in our own hearts, that we are wicked in our hearts, that we're broken, we have violated the law of God, and so we're falling apart on the inside. And here we are in the city that's probably one of the most self-medicated cities in the world. We're trying to fix something that's broken in the wrong way.
Yeah. Well, now, how did you end up here in New York doing this? What got you here?
Sure. Well, that's what happened at 9/11 for me. At 9/11, I was watching this terrible thing that was happening in the city and being traumatized.
Where were you?
North Carolina.
Oh, North Carolina.
Raleigh-Durham, North Carolina. And I was pastoring a church, Kings Park International Church. I was watching the news, and I get a phone call from my friend Rice Brooks in Nashville, Tennessee. And he said, would you join me in New York City? And I did not want to do it. I wanted to just sit there on my sofa, watch the news, and pray for our nation. But on the inside, I knew I needed to get off the couch, get in my car, grab a few friends, some other pastors and colleagues, and we came into New York City on 9/13. One of the first people we met was an NBC producer, a woman who did the news for Brian Williams. And she looked me square in the eye and she said, I said, what can we do to help your city? She told me what I would have never expected to hear from someone in national media. She said, we need more churches in this city. And
Is that right?
Yeah.
What did you think when you drove into town and you saw that smoke?
It was devastating, and yet it was interesting. I was so depressed, as were so many Americans. And I was in my SUV driving in. All the flights were shut down, if you remember. None of us were flying. Drove in, and it was nighttime, headed across the George Washington Bridge, and I looked downtown, watching the smoke rise up, and I heard the voice of God say, out of these ashes, I will build a great church. And what I knew that God was saying in my heart, not that I would be starting a great church, but God would, His people would rise up and be voices and hands and feet for healing and hope in a devastating situation. And it's out of that devastation that the people of this city rose up, those who were Christians and those who were not Christians. I mean, everyone rose up to do good, but in particular, the church rose up, and now many people have become followers of Jesus through helping and giving their life away instead of wanting to get in the city and accumulate more and run in that rat race.
Were you married at the time and moved here? What?
Yeah, I was going through a very, that was my own 9/11 when that was
really?
going. It was. I was going through a very dark season of my life when my marriage of 18 years was blown up in that season. And it was devastating to me and my family and my 4 sons, and we were all going through a dark season together. So here I was going through the darkest season of my life in the darkest place on this
America.
planet. Right. Very dark story here, and yet God was redeeming and restoring my life, my family, and this city in that season. So 2002, 2003 was all about redemption and restoration in my life as it was in the city.
Well, let me ask you another thing then. There's people watching this show, there's men watching this show right now, and their life has blown up in a marriage for maybe reasons beyond their control.
Sure.
It blew up. How did you manage to raise 4 fine sons?
Well, thank you. And I appreciate you saying that. They are, well, the first thing is really the grace of God. The second thing is I chose that I don't know what's going to happen in my life or my future or my sons. But there was one thing that I was committed to, and I would never lose a relationship with them. I don't care what they did. I'm not going to lose them. And I fought for them to have ongoing presence, be their dad, raise them, and it was quite a sacrifice in that season.
Yeah, because they're used to the dad being at home every day, every day,
Yeah.
every day, and all of a sudden everything changes and you've got to maintain
Right.
whatever it is that you want to have with them. That's got to be unbelievably hard.
And sometimes you get in a situation where you're in pain and you're in a valley and you just don't know what to do, and you're tempted to either opt out on life itself or to begin to do things that you know that could be self-deprecating or self-defeating or even harmful to yourself. And the way to get through something is just that. You have to go through it. And I found friends, I found spiritual family, and some of my best friends were cheering me on and helping me. I went and actually had counseling, visited with the therapist. I did whatever it took, and I walked all of my sons through that, and they all turned out, landed on their feet, became amazing, godly, wonderful young men. They all got married. My oldest son has 2 beautiful children, so I'm a granddad. And it's really, in essence, a comeback story and a story of second chances. I got married on Park Avenue in December of 2004 to the most amazing, incredible woman, Lynette. And she helped me to really raise my sons and complete them and bring them to their finish line in their young adulthood.
Well, what would you say has been a challenge that you've encountered in all of that? What's been maybe the hardest thing you've gone through with those boys? Or
You know, I think the greatest challenges a lot of times are internal, where I just feel I would have feelings of I just can't measure up, and does anybody really want to hear from a divorced minister from the South? Would I really be able to, in essence, like be both a mom and a dad to my sons? I would find myself staying up late at night making sandwiches, doing laundry, doing these things that I wasn't quite that good at. And we laugh about it now. We look back, they said, "Dad, you made the same thing just about every night. You threw a piece of meat on a pan, you put a little olive oil in it, you wilted some spinach, you kind of made some spinach, and you gave us that kind of dinner every night." It was real quick, but
now wait, let me ask you about these boys.
yeah.
Tell me, now someone told me that you had some kind of a tragedy or something happened with one of your boys?
Well, years later, and this is going way down the road, and this was only 3 years ago.
Oh, okay.
That my third son, out of my 4 sons, my third son was one of these kind of guys that was just, everybody liked him. He never did anything wrong. He was just a precious, solid, wonderful young man. And he was in his junior year, going to go into his senior year in the summertime. He had just returned from a missions trip in Tanzania, doing both humanitarian and sharing the gospel, the good news of Jesus. Great kid, and he came back with multiple nosebleeds, and we found out when he returned that he had a very rare form of sinus cancer that was the size of a tangerine in the base of his skull.
Oh my gosh.
And it was killing him. We immediately pulled him out of school, checked him into UNC hospitals, and he got in with a great surgery and radiation and oncology team. And he was, after 6 months of multiple radiation, chemotherapy, and 3 surgeries, he was cancer-free. He went back to school. He graduated on time through just the grit and determination that he's going to do this. Fell in love with the love of his life. They ended up, he got a great job. They got married. Cancer came back, and 9 months later, he passed away.
How many?
9 months after that, it returned.
my.
So it was 3 years from the start to his passing. And we thought he was going to win and beat that. So we had to, as a family, walk through another valley. And, you know, life isn't, especially the Christian life, is not all ups and ups. It's ups and it's downs. And we cannot predict what's going to happen to us. We think that we're the master of our own destiny until we hit something that is completely beyond our control and we don't know how to manage it or take hold of it.
That's when you need a community of believers.
Definitely. We always need that.
Because they can be there for you. And
Absolutely.
and I say believers because they know the Word of God.
Oh,
and the
yeah.
Word of God is so powerful. Individual sentences in it are life-changing.
Definitely.
And if you have that to hold on to. So you went through that. Are you okay? Did you survive it?
I don't know that I'll ever be okay, but yes, I survived it. And, you know, life moves on, and I'll forever and always love and miss that son. It's like an amputation. You'll forever miss that part of you that was cut off. But the rest of your body moves on. In my heart, I'm satisfied to know that even though it did not turn out the way I was asking God, I am deeply satisfied to know that God's plan prevails, that God has never let go of me or the rest of my family, and He's the one who's brought us through this, and we will see our brother or son, Jordan, on the other side. We will see him and be united with him.
And have all of eternity with Him.
Absolutely.
Which is longer than this life.
Well, this life is just a dress rehearsal, if you will. It's real, but it's not the ultimate. There's an ultimate life to come that is with God, where there are no tears, where the lion and the lamb lay down together, where there's no pain, no sorrow, where we really do function the way God designed us to originally function, without sin, without the presence or power of sin, and fortunately without the penalty of sin.
But that's because you have this relationship with Jesus,
It
right?
really is. I mean, the relationship with God is the bedrock.
That determines it, right?
Absolutely. And for me, it makes the most sense, and it also, I feel the presence of God on a daily basis. That doesn't make me perfect. It makes me actually needy. I need someone beyond myself to help me to manage and take authority over my life, which
Somebody
includes
who's really there even though you can't see Him.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, God is always with us.
But you know it because you can sense it.
I can sense it, yes, absolutely. And when you read the Bible, you see that God is near to those who are broken in heart. God cares about every single person that He created, that Jesus died on the cross for us to demonstrate His love, that He overcame all sin, sickness, disease, and everything else. And He said, I freely give this to you. And so we partake of the wonders of His love on a daily basis, and we overcome in this life through faith.
Because of Him.
Because of Him, through faith in Him.
All right. So you have the 3 boys.
Yep.
Anybody else? That's your family?
Well, yes, and you know that my wife adopted twin girls.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. I want to hear about it. I want to hear it from your point of view.
You know, when I so fell in love with my wife, and she told me that she wanted to have children. She had never been married, never had children. And she was 40 when we got married. And so I thought, this woman who's held out that long deserves everything that I can possibly give her to make it the way she wants it,
That's
as
nice.
well as me. And she really weighed in and put her faith and her energy into our household, living the life that I live, traveling, sharing Jesus everywhere, starting churches, starting orphanages, doing humanitarian work. She gave it her heart and soul, and most importantly, she really helped me bring up my sons to be amazing young men.
So she stepped in and did a really good job with them.
Awesome job. She's been a great stepmom, a great wife, and then she expressed to me how much she wanted to have her own children, and in particular, the longer we were married, it became clear she didn't just want to have children, she wanted to have a girl, and then somehow it morphed into twin girls. And that's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
So
women know how to work their husbands. I hate to tell you that.
Well, Lynette was always forthright. And here's one thing I like about my wife, is that she doesn't speak in parables. There's not a mysterious element. She is straight up with me. She's a New Yorker. She's worked in the corporate world, and she's had many partners that she's reported to, many strong men, and she's had strong men report to her. And one of the things that she does is she tells me exactly how she feels, and even if it's not something I want to hear, she doesn't carry that into the next day. So it's made for a great marriage. So she told me straight up, I want to have a baby. When we found out she could not, we got into the adoption arena, and we put ourselves out there for a potential adopters. And amazingly, you know, even at our age, we didn't even know that would be possible. But the way it all worked out, on Christmas morning, 2 little twin girls were born outside of a city called Bethlehem on Christmas.
In the U.S.?
Yeah, in the United States, in another state. But it was just like a miracle, almost a magical moment. And we got this call from the birth mom the night before, and we thought the babies would be born about a month down the road. And when we got that little text on our phone with their pictures, one had a red toboggan, one had a green toboggan, said, "Merry Christmas, come get your daughters." And so it was a family adoption. Our sons, their wives, everyone together said, "We're going to do this." And so these girls just turned 3, and this
3 years old right now.
Yeah, just turned 3. And as a family, we're always together celebrating as much as we possibly can be. The boys live all over the nation, but you know, it's really been a remarkable family story. And those girls really brought healing to our hearts through what we suffered as a family in the loss of a son.
It's almost like they were born at just the right time.
It's amazing. And had they been earlier and we had to go through all that, we could not have given them the attention that they deserve. And it had been later, it would not have been as meaningful, but it came almost at the same time. And our precious son Jordan, as sick as he was, every night for 2 months before he passed away, he got to hold and hug those little ones, and he loved them with all of his heart.
Oh, and then see, they'll all be together in eternity.
No doubt about it.
Yeah,
Through the grace
so
of God.
This is not the end of life.
Definitely.
And for people that are watching this show, don't you think it's important that they know this is a dress rehearsal? Like you said earlier, it's not.
Yeah.
It's not all there is, and you don't go into nothingness,
Sure.
and there's not just blank, and you don't get a second life. You don't get reincarnated. A lot of people think, well, that happens. The Bible says, nope, it's appointed unto man once to live, and after that, the judgment.
Right.
Well, folks, I think you have seen a real pastor. You have thought, are there any real pastors? Are there any real men of God that they're the real thing? Well, you just met one. I don't think you could meet anybody more real than Ron Lewis, more truthful and more normal. So you can do it too. If you will ask Jesus to come into your life, come into your heart, change you, and give you a personal relationship with Him, He'll do it, and your life will change. So thank you so much for tuning in tonight. It wasn't an accident that you turned on the TV tonight, and I hope you received some wisdom and that you have a great rest of the night, whether you're going to sleep or you're going to work. I'll see you next time. Bye. Hello, I'm Betty Swann, the woman who interviews people on the show. I want to tell you about something we're doing that you might want to be a part of, feeding people with pennies and small change you find. The exchange rate makes them valuable. I saved $3.22, told my friends on social media, and they shared it. $215,000 has come in, 100% goes for food. We've fed people in 21 countries. Come help us.